The morning air at Fort Carson was sharp and cold, biting at the skin of every soldier standing in formation. The Colorado sun had barely crept over the mountains, casting long shadows across the parade ground where Alpha Company stood at attention. Private Maya Torres was in the back row, as always. She was small, barely 5'3". Her uniform hung just a little too loose on her frame, and her voice when she spoke was so quiet that most soldiers had to lean in just to hear her. She had joined the Army 8 months ago, fresh out of a tiny town in New Mexico that most people couldn't find on a map. She had no family to speak of, no boyfriend waiting back home, no cheerleaders at her graduation from basic training, just herself. And that's how the others saw her, alone, weak, out of place. "Hey, Torres," a voice sneered from 2 rows ahead. It was Corporal Daniels, a thick-necked infantryman who thought his 2 years of service made him a war hero. "You sure you're in the right line? The librarians meet on Thursdays." A few soldiers chuckled. Maya didn't respond. She kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight. "Leave her alone, Daniels," someone muttered half-heartedly, but no one really meant it. No one ever stood up for her. Not really. The truth was, Maya had heard worse. In basic training, the drill sergeants called her Mouse because she never yelled back. In AIT, her bunkmate said she'd never make it past her first deployment. Even here, at her first real duty station, she was invisible. A shadow. The girl no one remembered, but Maya didn't join the Army to be remembered. She joined because she had nowhere else to go. And because deep down she wanted to prove something. To who, she wasn't sure yet. "Fall in." The voice boomed across the field like a thunderclap. Sergeant First Class Drummond strode onto the parade ground, his boots striking the asphalt with authority. He was a mountain of a man, 6'4", with a scar running down his left cheek and eyes that had seen too many deployments to count. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He just expected perfection, and he rarely got it. "Listen up." Drummond's voice could have shattered glass. "We just got word from command. There's a situation developing 50 miles north. A civilian medevac helicopter went down in the mountains during a training flight. 2 pilots on board. One's critically injured, the other's trying to keep him alive, but they're stranded in rough terrain and a storm's rolling in fast." The soldiers shifted. This wasn't a drill. "Search and rescue is stretched thin," Drummond continued. "They've got birds in the air, but the weather's closing the window. We've been tasked to provide ground support if needed. But here's the problem." He paused, scanning the rows of soldiers. "We need someone who can fly." Silence. "The downed bird is a UH-72 Lakota, light utility helicopter. We've got one sitting in the hangar right now, fueled and ready. But our assigned pilot is on leave and the backup just called in sick. So I'm asking you," Drummond's eyes moved across the formation, hard and unforgiving, "who here can fly a helicopter?" No one moved. Maya felt her heart start to pound. Her hands, clasped behind her back, began to tremble. "Anyone." Drummond's voice was sharp now, impatient. "I don't care if you flew crop dusters back home or got your license on weekends. If you've got stick time, speak up. Lives are on the line." Still, nothing. Daniels smirked and whispered loud enough for others to hear. "Yeah, right. Like any of us are pilots." A few nervous laughs, Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced. She thought about staying silent. She thought about blending in like she always did, keeping her head down, not drawing attention, but then she thought about the pilots in those mountains. Alone. Dying. She thought about what it felt like to be invisible. And slowly, shakily, Maya raised her hand. At first no one noticed. Her hand was small, her arm thin. She stood in the back, barely visible between 2 taller soldiers. But then Drummond's eyes locked onto her. "You," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Step forward." The rows parted. Every head turned. Maya walked to the front, her boots echoing in the sudden quiet. She could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her. Drummond looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. "Name: Private Maya Torres." "Sergeant, you're telling me you can fly a helicopter?" "Yes." "Sergeant." A wave of murmurs rippled through the formation. Someone snorted. Daniels laughed out loud. "Her? She can barely carry a ruck. This is a joke, right?" Drummond raised a hand and the noise died instantly. His eyes never left Maya's. "Where'd you learn?" Maya swallowed. Her voice was steady but soft. "My uncle ran a charter service in New Mexico. I grew up around helicopters." Started learning when I was 15. Got my private license at 18. Logged over 300 hours before I enlisted. Drummond's eyes narrowed. Why didn't you go warrant officer? Become an Army pilot? Maya hesitated. I didn't think I was good enough. For a long moment, Drummond said nothing. Then he turned to his staff sergeant. Get her a flight suit, and get that bird prepped. Now. Sergeant, are you serious? The staff sergeant looked stunned. She's infantry. She's not rated. She's all we've got, Drummond snapped. Unless you'd like to tell those pilots they're on their own. The staff sergeant's mouth closed. He nodded stiffly. Yes, Sergeant. Drummond looked back at Maya. His voice dropped, quieter now, but no less intense. You've got one shot, Torres. Don't waste it, Maya nodded. I won't. As she turned to follow the staff sergeant, she heard Daniels mutter behind her. This is insane. She's gonna get herself killed. Maybe, Maya thought. But at least for the first time in her life, someone would remember her name. The room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Maya stood at attention, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall behind the commander's desk. She didn't look at Daniels. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Commander Lieutenant Colonel Hayes was a career officer, mid-50s with gray at his temples, and a reputation for being fair but firm. He studied the file in front of him, his expression unreadable. Corporal Daniels, Hayes said slowly. Walk me through your complaint. Daniels straightened in his chair, adopting a tone of concerned professionalism. Sir, Private Torres took control of a military aircraft without proper authorization. She's not a rated Army pilot. She has no orders placing her in an aviation role. Sergeant Drummond may have given her verbal permission in the moment, but that doesn't override regulations. She put herself, Specialist Rahimi, and those injured pilots at risk by flying a bird she had no business touching. He paused, letting his words sink in. If we let soldiers just decide when the rules don't apply, sir, we lose discipline. We lose order. I'm not saying she meant harm. I'm saying she was reckless, and recklessness gets people killed. Hayes nodded slowly, then turned to Maya. Private Torres, do you dispute any of the facts Corporal Daniels just presented? Maya's voice was steady but quiet. No, sir. I'm not a rated Army pilot. I did take control of that aircraft based on Sergeant Drummond's orders, but I didn't disobey anyone. I was asked if I could fly. I said yes, and I was ordered to do it. By a non-commissioned officer, Daniels cut in, not by someone with the authority to override aviation protocol. Hayes held up a hand. Corporal, I'll ask the questions. He looked back at Maya. Torres, did you at any point believe you were putting lives in danger? Maya hesitated. She wanted to say no. She wanted to defend herself. But she'd been raised to tell the truth even when it hurt. Every flight has risk, sir, she said carefully, especially in those conditions. But I believed I could do it safely, and I did. That's not for you to decide, Daniels said, his voice rising. That's for trained, certified Army aviators to decide. You're infantry, Torres. You carry a rifle. You don't fly helicopters. Maya's hands tightened behind her back, but she said nothing. Hayes leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. This is complicated. On one hand, 2 men are alive because of what you did. On the other hand, Corporal Daniels is correct. Regulations exist for a reason. He closed the file. I'm going to take 24 hours to review this. In the meantime, Private Torres, you're restricted to base. No duties, no training. You're on administrative hold until I make a decision. Dismissed. Maya saluted sharply. Yes, sir. She turned and walked out, her spine straight, her face calm. But inside, she was screaming. The next 24 hours were the longest of Maya's life. She stayed in her barracks room alone, replaying everything over and over. The flight, the rescue, the look on Drummond's face when he shook her hand, and now this. She thought about calling someone. But who? She had no family, no close friends. She was alone, just like always. That evening, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Specialist Rahimi standing there, still in her uniform, her face serious. Can I come in? Maya stepped aside. Rahimi closed the door behind her and sat on the edge of the bunk. I heard what Daniels did, she said quietly. It's garbage, Maya, complete garbage. Maya sat across from her saying nothing. I wrote a statement, Rahimi continued. I told Commander Hayes exactly what happened. That you flew like a professional. That you made the right calls. That those men would be dead if it wasn't for you. She paused. I also told him that Daniels wasn't even there. He didn't see what you did. He's just bitter because you made him look small. Maya's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Rahimi said. Hayes is old school. He cares about rules, and technically Daniels isn't wrong. You weren't supposed to fly that bird. I know. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Rahimi stood. Whatever happens, Maya, you did the right thing. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise. After she left, Maya sat alone in the dim room, staring at her hands. The same hands that had gripped the controls. The same hands that had pulled 2 dying men from a mountainside. And she made a decision. If they were going to punish her for saving lives, she wouldn't go down quietly. The next morning, Maya was called back to Commander Hayes' office. This time, Sergeant Drummond was there too, standing at ease near the window. Daniels was absent. Hayes gestured for her to sit. She did, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Private Torres, Hayes began. I've reviewed all the statements. I've spoken with Sergeant Drummond, Specialist Rahimi, the mechanics who prepped the bird, and the 2 pilots you rescued. He paused. I've also spoken with the Aviation Battalion Commander and reviewed your civilian flight records. Maya's heart pounded, but she kept her face neutral. Hayes leaned forward. Here's what I found. You have over 300 hours of documented flight time. You hold a valid civilian rotary wing license. You've flown search and rescue missions in difficult terrain. And according to the pilots you saved, you flew that Lakota better than some officers they've flown with. He let that hang in the air. That said, Corporal Daniels' complaint isn't baseless. You did operate a military aircraft without being a rated Army aviator. Regulations were bypassed. And in a normal situation, that would be a problem. Maya's stomach sank. But this wasn't a normal situation, Hayes continued. Sergeant Drummond made a command decision in a life-or-death scenario. He asked for volunteers with flight experience. You stepped forward. You performed beyond expectation, and 2 American lives were saved as a result. He closed the file. I'm not going to pursue charges, Private Torres, but I am going to do something else. He slid a paper across the desk. This is a packet for the Warrant Officer Flight Training Program. Sergeant Drummond and I have already signed letters of recommendation. Captain Morales from Aviation is sponsoring you. If you want to fly for the Army, really fly, this is your shot. Maya stared at the paper, her vision blurring. You've got the skill, Torres, Drummond said from the window, his voice gruff but not unkind. Don't waste it. Hayes stood and extended his hand. What do you say, Private? Maya rose slowly, her legs shaking. She took his hand. I say yes, sir. Thank you. 3 months later, Maya stood on the tarmac at Fort Rucker, Alabama, in a fresh flight suit with her name stitched across the chest. She was no longer a private. She was a warrant officer candidate, 1 step away from becoming a full Army pilot. The other candidates were mostly men, most of them older, most of them louder. But when the instructor asked who had real-world flight experience, Maya raised her hand without hesitation, and this time no one laughed. Back at Fort Carson, Corporal Daniels was reassigned to a different unit after an investigation revealed he'd filed the complaint not out of concern for safety, but out of jealousy and spite. His career stalled. He faded into obscurity. Maya never thought about him again. She thought about the 2 pilots she'd saved. Both had recovered. One sent her a letter thanking her, saying he was alive to see his daughter's wedding because of her. She thought about her uncle, who taught her to fly and told her she could do anything if she was brave enough to try. And she thought about that quiet girl in the back row, the one everyone underestimated, the one they called Mouse. That girl was gone now. In her place was a pilot, a leader, a soldier who had proven that courage didn't come from being the loudest or the strongest. It came from raising your hand when no one else would, from stepping forward when it mattered most, and from refusing to let anyone tell you that you didn't belong. Years later, Captain Maya Torres would fly combat missions in some of the most dangerous skies in the world. She would train the next generation of pilots. She would be decorated for valor, for skill, for leadership, but she would never forget the day Sergeant Drummond asked, "Who here can fly?" The day the quiet girl raised her hand and changed everything. The helicopter bucked violently, throwing Maya hard against her harness. The controls shuddered in her hands, Outside, the trees swayed and bent in the wind, their branches reaching toward the spinning rotors like grasping fingers. "Come on," Maya muttered through gritted teeth. "Come on." She fought the collective, pulling harder, compensating for the gusts that kept shoving the Lakota sideways. The skids lifted 6 inches off the ground, then a foot. Then the wind hit again and they dropped back down with a bone-rattling thud. In the back, one of the injured pilots groaned. Rahimi braced herself against the wall, her face pale but focused. "Torres, we need to go now," she shouted over the roar of the engine.
"He's losing blood fast."
Maya didn't answer. She couldn't afford to split her focus. Every ounce of her attention was on the controls, on the wind, on the narrow corridor of sky between the trees. She adjusted the throttle, eased the cyclic forward, pulled the collective again, smoother this time, feeling for the sweet spot where lift overcame weight. The Lakota rose. 3 feet, 5 feet, 10. The treetops were right there, so close she could see individual pine needles whipping in the storm. The rotor blades screamed as they chewed through the turbulent air, and then, with a lurch that made her stomach drop, they cleared the trees. Maya banked hard to the left, away from the mountain slope, climbing fast into open sky. The Lakota shook and rattled, but it held. The altimeter spun upward. 500 feet. 1,000. 1,500. "We're clear." Rahimi's voice was breathless, almost disbelieving. "We're actually clear." Maya allowed herself one breath, just one. Then she keyed the radio. "Ground command, this is Lakota 1. I have both pilots on board. 1 critical, 1 stable. Heading back to base. ETA 12 minutes. The reply came through crackling static. "Copy that, Lakota 1. Medical team is standing by." "You did good, Torres. Bring them home." The flight back was a blur. The storm chased them south, lightning flickering in the clouds behind them, but Maya stayed ahead of it. She pushed the Lakota as hard as she dared, every second counting for the man bleeding out in the back. The base appeared on the horizon. She radioed the tower, got immediate clearance, and brought the helo down fast and smooth onto the landing pad outside the medical building. The doors flew open before the skids even touched concrete. A team of medics swarmed the helicopter, pulling the injured pilots out on stretchers, shouting orders, moving with controlled urgency. Maya sat in the cockpit, hands still on the controls, watching them disappear into the building. Her body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally draining away. Rahimi appeared at the cockpit door. Her uniform was spattered with blood, her face exhausted, but she was smiling. "You saved their lives," she said quietly. "Both of them. You know that, right?" Maya nodded, but she couldn't find words. She just sat there staring at her hands. "Come on," Rahimi said gently. "Let's get you out of there." By the time Maya walked back to the company area, the sun was setting. The storm had passed, leaving the sky streaked with orange and purple. Her flight suit was still damp with sweat and rain. Her legs felt like rubber. She expected the barracks to be empty. She expected to slip in quietly, change, and maybe collapse on her bunk. But when she rounded the corner, she stopped. The entire platoon was standing outside in formation, not at attention, just standing there, waiting. Sergeant Drummond was at the front, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable as always, and when they saw her, they started clapping. It wasn't loud at first. Just a few slow, deliberate claps, but then it spread. More soldiers joined in. The sound grew, echoing off the buildings. Some of them were smiling. Others just nodded at her with respect in their eyes. Corporal Daniels was there too. He wasn't clapping. He just stood with his hands at his sides, staring at the ground, his face red. Drummond stepped forward as the applause faded. "Torres," he said, his voice carrying across the group. "You flew into a storm, landed in terrain most pilots wouldn't touch, and brought 2 men home alive. That's not just skill, that's courage." He paused, then added, "I was wrong about you." "We all were." Maya felt her throat tighten. She didn't trust herself to speak, so she just nodded. Drummond held out his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm, respectful. "Get some rest, Private," he said. "You've earned it." As the formation broke up and soldiers headed back inside, a few of them stopped to clap her on the shoulder or mutter quiet words of congratulations. Even some who'd never spoken to her before. But Daniels didn't move. He stood off to the side, watching her with something dark in his eyes. Not respect, not gratitude, resentment. Maya walked past him without a word. She didn't owe him anything. That night, Maya lay on her bunk staring at the ceiling. The barracks were quiet. Most of the others were asleep. But her mind wouldn't stop replaying the flight. The wind, the trees, the weight of those 2 lives in her hands. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Captain Morales, Aviation Battalion. Heard about what you did today. If you're serious about flying, come see me tomorrow. We need pilots like you. Don't waste that talent in the infantry." Maya read it 3 times. Then she set the phone down and closed her eyes. For the first time since she'd enlisted, she felt like she wasn't invisible anymore. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. But respect, Maya would learn, was a fragile thing, and not everyone was ready to give it. 2 days later, she was called into the commander's office. She thought maybe it was about the flight, maybe a commendation, maybe a formal thank you. But when she walked in and saw the expression on the commander's face, she knew something was wrong. Sitting in the corner, arms crossed and smirking, was Corporal Daniels, and on the commander's desk was a formal complaint against her. The commander looked up, his face grim. "Private Torres," he said slowly, "we need to talk about what happened on that flight. Because Corporal Daniels here says you endangered lives. He says you had no authorization to fly that bird, and he's recommending you be charged with disobeying a direct order and reckless endangerment." Maya's blood turned to ice. Daniels leaned forward, his smile widening. "You thought you were a hero, didn't you, Torres?" he said softly. "But heroes follow the rules. You broke them, and now you're going to pay for it." Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding, her mind racing, everything she'd done, everything she'd risked, and now it was being used against her. The commander sighed and opened the file in front of him. "This is serious, Torres. If these charges stick, you could be looking at an Article 15, maybe worse." Maya's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had saved 2 lives, and now she was the one on trial. But as she stood there, staring at Daniel's smug face, something hardened inside her. She wasn't going to let him take this from her, not without a fight. The hangar was cold and smelled of oil and metal. The UH-72 Lakota sat in the center like a sleeping beast, its rotors still, its frame gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Maya stood at the entrance, staring at it, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. Behind her, boots echoed on the concrete. Staff Sergeant Kelly appeared with a flight suit draped over his arm and a helmet in his hand. His face was tight, skeptical. "Here," he said, shoving them at her. "You've got 10 minutes to suit up and run pre-flight. Weather window's closing fast. If you can't get that bird in the air, we're calling this off." Maya took the gear without a word. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Something had shifted the moment Drummond gave her the order. The fear was still there, buried deep, but it was covered now by something stronger. Purpose. She changed quickly in the side room, pulling the flight suit over her uniform, zipping it up to her throat. The helmet was a little too big, but she adjusted the straps until it fit snug. When she looked at herself in the cracked mirror on the wall, she barely recognized the person staring back. She looked like a pilot. She stepped back into the hangar. A small crew had gathered near the helicopter. Mechanics, a medic, and Sergeant Drummond himself, arms crossed, watching her with those hard, unreadable eyes. Maya walked to the Lakota and began her pre-flight check. Her hands moved with practiced confidence now, muscle memory taking over. She checked the tail rotor, the main rotor blades, the fuel lines. She inspected the skids, the engine cowling, the door latches, everything her uncle had drilled into her 1,000 times. "Where'd you really learn this?" one of the mechanics asked, watching her work. His tone wasn't mocking, just curious. "New Mexico," Maya said, running her hand along the edge of a rotor blade. "My uncle's company did search and rescue contracts in the desert. Taught me everything he knew. Why'd you stop?" Maya paused. Her fingers stilled on the cold metal. "He died, crashed during a dust storm. After that, the company went under. I had nothing left. So I enlisted." The mechanic nodded slowly. "He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't need to." Maya climbed into the cockpit. The seat was worn, the controls familiar. She ran through the startup sequence in her mind, then began flipping switches. The instrument panel lit up. The turbine began to whine, low at first, then building into a roar. The rotors started turning slowly, then faster. The whole hangar filled with the deep whump-whump-whump of the blades cutting air. Drummond stepped closer, speaking into a headset so she could hear him over the noise. You've got a GPS marker for the crash site. It's rough terrain, rocks, trees, limited clearings. The wind's picking up and visibility's dropping. You'll have maybe 30 minutes before the storm hits full force. Maya's voice crackled back through the comms. Understood. There's a medic going with you. Specialist Rahimi. She'll handle the injured once you get them out. A woman in her late 20s appeared at the side door, hauling a medical pack. She gave Maya a quick nod and climbed into the back, strapping herself in. Drummond leaned closer to the cockpit window. His voice was quieter now, just for her. Listen to me, Torres. I don't care what anyone out there thinks of you. I don't care if they laughed. You've got the controls now. That makes you responsible for every life on this bird. You understand? Maya met his eyes. Yes, Sergeant. Then prove them wrong. She nodded once. Drummond stepped back and gave the signal. Maya pulled the collective and the Lakota lifted smoothly off the ground. The hangar fell away beneath her. The base spread out below, small and distant. And then she banked north toward the mountains and everything else disappeared. The flight was smooth at first. The sky was pale gray, heavy with clouds, but the wind was manageable. Maya kept her eyes on the instruments, her hands steady on the controls. In the back, Specialist Rahimi was silent, checking her gear, preparing for whatever they'd find. The radio crackled. Lakota 1, this is ground command. You're approaching the search zone? Crash site is 2 miles northeast of your current position. How copy? Solid copy, ground command. 2 miles northeast. Moving to intercept. Maya pushed the stick forward, descending slightly to get below the cloud layer. The mountains rose up around her, jagged and unforgiving. Pine trees covered the slopes like dark fur. Somewhere down there, 2 men were waiting, hoping. She spotted the wreckage a moment later, a twisted heap of metal wedged between 2 large boulders on a steep hillside. One rotor was snapped clean off. The tail section was crumpled. Smoke was still rising from the engine. There, Maya said into the comms. I see them. She circled once, looking for a place to land. The terrain was brutal. Too many rocks, too many trees. No flat ground, this is tight, Rahimi said from the back, her voice tense. Can you get us down? Maya didn't answer right away. She was calculating. Wind speed, rotor clearance, angle of approach. There was one spot. Maybe. A narrow clearing about 50 yards from the wreck. It was small, barely bigger than the Lakota's footprint, surrounded by trees. If she came in wrong, they'd clip a rotor and go down just like the bird they were trying to save. But it was the only option. Strap in tight, Maya said. This is going to be close. She brought the Lakota around, lining up her approach. The wind gusted hard, shoving the helicopter sideways. She corrected, fighting the stick. Her pulse was loud in her ears, but her hands didn't shake. Slowly, carefully, she descended. The trees rose up on either side, their branches reaching like claws. The skids hovered just above the ground. She adjusted. Inches mattered now, and then with a soft thud, the Lakota touched down. We're down, Maya said, exhaling. Go, fast, Rahimi was already moving. She threw open the side door and jumped out, medical pack on her back, sprinting toward the wreckage. Maya kept the rotors spinning, ready for a quick takeoff. Through the windshield, she could see Rahimi reaching the crashed helo. One pilot was slumped in the cockpit, unconscious. The other was on the ground beside him, his leg twisted at a horrible angle, his face pale with pain. Minutes crawled by. Maya watched the sky. The clouds were darker now. The wind was rising. Then Rahimi's voice crackled over the radio. I've got them both. One stable but unconscious. The other's got a fractured femur and possible internal bleeding. I need help getting them to the bird. Maya's jaw tightened. I'm coming. She shut down the engine just enough to keep it warm, then unbuckled and jumped out. The cold air hit her like a fist. She ran across the rocky ground to the wreck. The injured pilot looked up at her. His eyes were glazed with pain, but he managed a weak smile. You? Our ride? Yeah, Maya said, crouching beside him. Let's get you out of here. Together, she and Rahimi lifted him. He groaned, biting back a scream. They hauled him across the uneven ground, step by agonizing step. Then they went back for the unconscious pilot, dragging him between them. By the time they got both men into the Lakota, the first drops of rain were falling. Maya jumped back into the cockpit, her hands flying over the controls. The engine roared back to life. The rotors spun faster, but as she pulled the collective, the wind slammed into them like a wall. The Lakota lurched sideways, and in that moment, Maya realized the hardest part wasn't getting down. It was getting back up.